Hi, Elwaleed.
Hi.
Nice to see you, and nice to finally see you in person.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming. A few delays, but we got there in the end.
Yeah,
it's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very, very happy to have you, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
All good.
Quick first question. How do we, let's say, put a soul in a model? As an animator, sorry. Yeah.
I think that's a hard question to actually answer. Not because it's difficult, but more because there's a lot that goes into it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the first thing you want to do is understand what that character's trying to portray, what emotional state that you need to connect to in the scene that they happen to be in, and then kind of look up how we recognize that in other humans. Maybe if it's a talking character, or if it's a character that's based off of an actor's performance, you can look at what they did and really try to read that and try to put that into it. But a lot of it really comes down to kind of studying facial performances and body language, because that's how we tend to kind of read a lot of things we associate with. So even if it's not necessarily a creature that has human anatomy, you still want to kind of create what we read as anger, sadness, fear, or joy, in a way that kind of other humans can recognize.
Okay, so it's always close to, let's say, human behavior or human interaction. I mean, way of interacting with emotion.
Most of the times, there are certain occasions where you don't need to rely on the human aspect of it, where there are, like in dogs, for instance, they're a very common household pet. So us as humans recognize their emotional states quite easily. So then you can actually just look at the animal. Whereas if you have, a talking llama.
Yeah.
Not many people have llamas as pets, so you're probably going to fall back more onto your human emotional states and build your facial kind of rig to kind of almost mirror the muscles of a human, and actually kind of mirror the changes in a human face to display the different emotions. So like the brows together and down for anger, and then for sadness you can kind of have the down-turned corners and stuff. It might be something that that particular animal can't physically do in real life, but we can recognize it when we watch it. And it won't always, depending on how stylized your project is. If it's something really realistic, you probably want to hold back on that a little bit, just so it doesn't pull you out of the believability of it being a real llama. But if it's more of a kind of a 2D thing, or more stylized, you can actually get away with a lot more and make it even more exaggerated than a human. You look at the Illumination movies, or the Sony movies, where everything's quite pushed, or even the traditional 2D animation. You still recognize all of those emotional states. They're just exaggerated versions of what a human does.
It's like the difference between cinema and theaters, for instance. You have, for instance, actors in theaters tend to exaggerate their act.
Yeah.
So the person at the back can, see the emotion.
It's a similar kind of thing. But you also want, I think, as well, for a lot of stylized stuff, comedy is probably a bigger factor, which is why you don't get many dramatic kind of CG movies, I guess, and 2D movies to that. There are a few, but generally what sells is comedy, because you can go between the extremes quite easily. Whereas with VFX and stuff, you're getting a lot more of that subtlety in the performance come through, and you get more of the kind of the slow burn movies, your Planet of the Apes, your Ivans, and the one and only Ivan, and like other kind of films like that, where they're aiming for the more realistic approach. So everything's a little bit more tone, a little bit more subtle, but the camera also has to be quite close to actually read a lot of that subtlety.
You mentioned earlier, Elimination, MacGuff, which used to be MacGuff, and Sony. Why do you think in the UK we don't have as many as animation studios as other countries like France or North America?
It's probably many factors. I mean, my first film project was The Tale of Despereaux, which was a CG film that was made in the UK. It didn't do terribly well, which might be one of the reasons why we haven't had a big industry here in the UK. But I think as well there's more emphasis on the arts in schooling, maybe in France and places like Canada. Here, I don't think there's as much funding towards that specific type of art form. I guess there's more funding towards the more technical roles, which pushes more towards the visual effects routes. I think maybe tax breaks and tax incentives also play a role. I think.
That's true. I did not think about this. Yeah.
So there's probably many factors, not just a physical location, but the schooling in that area. How easy it is to get artists like that. And the money you can get to make a film like that.
Yeah, because I'm exaggerating here, but in France you have as much VFX or 3D schools as tobacco shops. I think there is more 3D schools in France than tobacco shops, because now the tobacco shops are closing down because the industry is shifting a bit.
Yeah.
But and I mean, even myself, back on the days when I did my first movie, we did not even finish it, but it was a 3D full CG movie. It was not. There is nothing. There is no VFX. There is no plate, or it's not a VFX project. So it's a full CG animation project. So it's true. I think depend how you push things around. So the reason why I'm asking is London is I think is the biggest VFX hub, or at least one of the biggest VFX hubs on the planet. So I always ask myself, the talent is there. If you're an animator, and of course you can say it's true or not, as an animator, if you work for a VFX movie or a full CG movie, well, we can argue about, for instance, is Lion King a CG movie? It's an animated movie.
It's fully animated, and it's a full CG movie. There's no
because people.
Well, the first one, there was one shot that was not full CG.
I think 4.
4?
Yeah, it was just I think it was 4 shots, and those 4 shots, most of them were like sunrise and sunset.
Yeah.
Actually, the first shot of the movie is a real shot, and I remember, I'm not gonna say names, but I remember some soup saying, "I think we could have done it better than CG." I think it was shot in a location in Kenya.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
I have memories of that shot being the director of photography really liked it, so insisted on it being in the film. So that was the one that was in there.
But to be fair, I think it plays a role. Psychologically, okay,
it sets the tone.
Yeah,
for the
straight
rest
away.
Of the film.
Yeah, okay, it's real, and I think it helps building. Not questioning what are the character coming from. That makes sense.
Yeah. But it was a shot with no characters in it, so I can still claim it was an animated movie.
No, it is. Of course it is. Definitely. No, I think for the Oscars, they don't label it as an animated movie. I think it's for the credit categories. I think it's something like that. So, because as an animated movie in the Oscars, I'm not sure about this, but from I think if my informations are correct, is if it's an animated movie, you just have animated movie category, but you don't have like director, DOP, and etc. so on and so forth. But if it's a live action movie, you have a lot of
more categories to kind of enter into.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can.
I think so.
Yeah. That's the only explanation. I don't see why it's not like labeled as an animated movie. It's full animation.
I have theories. I don't know if they're correct, and I don't know if I can say them or anything
No,
like that. But I mean, at the same time, you look at other movies that have been nominated for Best Animated Feature that actually had more live action, like Wall-E. Like,
yeah.
all of the footage of humans before they got big, it was real footage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's amazing.
That was an animated movie, but
but you had more footage, more live action footage in it than Lion King, and the first one was labeled as animated movie, but not the second one.
I can see arguments for both because when we'd done the previs for it, it was it went to they kind of shot all the cameras virtually, so there were live action techniques utilized. But I'd argue the same thing is the case in full CG movies. They utilize a lot of live action kind of techniques. So I don't really know where the distinction is and which one can be this and which one can be that and why. I do kind of feel it might be political to get more, potentially win more awards in different categories, but as long as the work is, I think, respected and there is some level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Recognized. I don't really mind what it's categorized as, especially if, you don't really... It's nice to win awards, but I don't think any of us get into this to win awards. You get especially into this because you're making you're doing something really fun.
Yeah, of course.
And B, you can do something that actually a lot of people get joy from.
Yeah.
That's the bigger win for me. So I don't really care what it was up for.
I think we are a little bit like astronauts in a sense. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because astronauts are not very well paid comparing to other fields. I don't know, pilots. Pilots are paid way more than astronauts, for instance.
Wow, I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, but they don't care because they're not doing it for the money. I mean, just being there, I don't know, in space, it's something that not many people can have or can experience this. So it's similar for us. Well, the thing is, I think we're doing it because we are passionate. But to be honest, sometimes the industry is pushing to have very low salaries sometimes, I think it's getting better, especially after COVID, but I don't know. I don't know what's your opinion on it, but for me, I think it's getting better, especially for the low salaries, like general salaries.
I think it's becoming an artist's market, whereas historically, I remember when I joined the industry, there was maybe 4 or 5 junior positions at a company. And there was only 2 or 3 film projects in London at the time. And now we're at a point where there's actually, 15 big companies, you can argue, and there's dozens, if not more than that, project happening all the time. So there's actually where we've gone from a point where there were too many artists for the work, so the companies could dictate. Now it's getting to the point where there aren't enough artists and there's not enough experience because our industry is relatively new. Animation is old, but even that is 100, 200 years, maybe you can argue. But visual effects itself is 50 years old. And it's only really getting into its passing its infancy, I think now.
I did not, when I grew up, I did not have any of my, parents, friends, being in the industry. So none of my friends had parents in the VFX industry, for instance. So it's it's, as you said, it's fairly new. But it's visual effects as we know it now, with assisted with computers, are as you said 50 years old. But it was there before, I don't know, maybe 100 years, 50 years before, since cinema appeared, because special effects, well, it was called more special effects back then. Transition or even the fading, or from one shot to another, was something that you don't have in camera. You have to do this in post. So this part of special effects as well was not animation, but still, it was, you're tweaking the frame in a sense. So
and a lot of that was done on the actual film.
In the film, it was crazy. Even trickier. It was you have to cut it and take the negative and you try to do something from it. It's quite tricky. So Uh, as an animation supervisor, how your day look like?
Lots of meetings. It's just consistently, you know, you get in like 9 a.m. or something, you've got half an hour to read your emails and set your world in order before your first meeting starts, and then it's just kind of consistent through the day. There's lots of decisions that kind of need to be made along the way. And when you first start out, it's a little bit daunting, just because, you know, it's not like when you're an artist and, you know, you're just focusing on your one shot or your handful of shots and stuff, and then you get that done and it's fine. The decisions that you make could cost, you know, a lot of money.
Millions.
Like millions, if not. So you really need to have to be confident in what you're doing, and be confident when you don't know what you're doing to ask someone that does, and actually go down the right route, because there's too many times where that, I think, especially I've seen it on shows I've been on, I've seen it on shows that have been around me, where maybe not enough of that happened, and then it ends up becoming a bit of a mess of a project. So you have to kind of handle the decision making part of it, but you also have a team to look after, and you have a team to kind of help bring up as well, because some of the artists, especially on a long show, some shows run for 2 years, 3 years, you'll have people who start juniors, but by the time they finish, you've helped them develop, and they're doing more and more senior stuff by the end of it. And it's really nice to see that you've been a part of that. With that whole kind of the pressure of the decision making as well, I think it's really important, because that is quite stressful, and there's a lot of pressure on you. It's really important you don't push that onto your team too. So they need to come out feeling like they've got a leader that cares about them, and you kind of have their best interests at heart. Even if you've had a really bad day, it's really important to try and not push that onto them.
Shield, like
you're shielding them, and you're trying to make things better for them at the same time as deliver this thing to the clients that they want. And sometimes the clients don't know what they want, or they're changing what they want, and that can also bring the team down.
That never happened.
But like you've been there as well, where a shot, you know, you've taken it all the way to final, then the concept has changed, and then it changed again. And even if you're given enough time to do the changes, which oftentimes you aren't, there's a lot of pressure, it can be kind of a bit of a mental blow, because you just feel like, oh, why is my stuff never good enough, or you're just like, you get tired of working on the same shot, and you get a bit kind of mentally drained with it as well, and then you stop progressing. So you kind of have to keep the morale of the team up as well through that.
You have to be like a psychologist. I mean, a little bit. Yeah,
kind of, because every artist is different, and their needs are different, and the way that what encourages them is different.
Yeah,
some people like pressure, some people hate it.
It's not a template, so, you know, right click template, and everyone will. It's like
even the way you give feedback is slightly different for each artist, because you just need to know what they respond to and how to get the best out of them. At the same time, it's like it's a lot of it is just balancing what the clients want, what your team needs, and kind of trying to make it meet in the middle whilst delivering something that you are also proud of. Because at the end of the day, we do this because we want to do something cool. So there's a lot to it.
You communicate a lot with the client, so that's why this is part of your day as an animation supervisor. How much knowledge the client have of the industry or of the field in general?
It varies. Some clients know nothing, and this might be their first project that has any visual effects in it. They don't even know what visual effects are. They just ask you for something, and then you have to kind of provide that, find a way to give them what they want and make them happy, or guide them in a way that if what they want is currently not possible for us, guide them in an alternative that they might be happy with as well, that we can provide. But you get some clients that have worked at the same studios as you, that you've worked on the same projects together, and whether it's a client outside, Anim director, or it's a director themselves, or VFX producer, or whatever, depending on what the show is and how its structure is. There's different kind of clients you actually face. Some people who were in our industry but have been out of it for quite a while because they're now client facing. I find sometimes they are not as in touch with currently what's happening, so they are giving notes based off of what used to be or what they think things should be rather than what they are. So that's another kind of balancing thing, because you always have to leave with the client happy. Even if you couldn't give them exactly what they wanted, you have to give them something that they're like,
close enough.
They need to come out thinking they won.
Of course. Well, it's an industry. They're paying money, so at
the end of the day, we're a service industry. They're paying us to provide a service, so we have to give them.
We are here to help them to tell the story, so their story. At the end of the day, sometimes I feel like artists, especially people that just join the industry, thinks that okay, it's my shot. Well, yes, but not really. I mean, you work on it, you killing yourself for it, but at the end of the day, it's not your shot. You're not owning it. I mean, in that sense, it's the client's shot, and he can keep it and can omit it if she wants to. So I mean, sometimes we still have to have this in the back of our head. It's very hard because it's an artistic field, plus I mean with the business, side of things. So it's very hard, I think, I don't know what you think, but
I think sense of ownership is quite important to what we do.
Yeah, I agree. No, of course. Yeah.
Even though it isn't our shot, it's not our film. It's somebody else's idea at the end of the day that we are trying to help realize. But I do think it's important that artists feel like they've contributed, because we do get into this because we feel like there's something there. And I don't think it's one thing I try not to do is to have shots move between lots of different people, because then if there's no sense of ownership there, nobody cares, and then you're not going to get a good quality shot out of it. So even if it isn't their film, isn't their shot, if you can keep it with one person, encourage them and try to push some of their ideas into it, especially if it's stuff that actually does improve the film,
of course.
And I think there's a huge sense of pride in artists when they see an idea that they've had, that the director likes, or the clients like, and has made it into the film. And especially when it's moments where they've actually changed parts of the story to incorporate that idea, that's quite cool. It's rare,
of course.
Well, no, it's not rare actually. Sorry, it happens quite a lot, but it's nice to see in an artist, because you see like a big beaming smile on their face, and they feel quite happy, and they're like, this joke that I came up with is in the movie. Millions of people are watching this joke that I just told in the kitchen the other day. So that's quite nice.
No, I totally agree with all you said. With all you've said. The only thing is, sometimes we forget. Yes, it's we have to have sense of ownership. Yes, we did the work. I mean, of course, but it's not our story, so we have to stick to the story. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like if the client wants, I don't know, a plane crashing, and in a cornfield, well, it's not us to judge why a cornfield, not like olive grove or whatever.
Yeah, it's hard, especially when you're an artist and you've just got like one shot. It's hard to see things in context of what it means to the rest of the story. I think artists, you generally have one shot here, one shot there, or if you're lucky, you have a few in sequence, so you can tell a bit of a story. But it's something that happens a lot with a lot of new animators, especially, where they get their shot and they want to shoehorn all of these different ideas into it, even though their shot just needs to be the character just stare and then turn to the right, but they want to go and do all of this stuff and add all of that kind of stuff to it, because they're like, I'm going to make this the best looking around shot ever, and that's not what the story needs. You get a better idea of that when you become a lead, because then you start looking after sequences, so you know the story of that sequence, and then when you're the supervisor, you look after the whole film. So then you're kind of like, okay, that sequence plays into this sequence, and how does that roll into that, and you get more of that sense of context. as you get more experience and you realize that you don't have to do everything with every shot. And it can be a very successful shot that doesn't actually do a lot.
Well, less is more.
Yeah.
Most of the time it works. So
yeah, I think in a lot of films, the shots that you remember are the slow shots. There's so many action shots, and you don't remember what happened really. There's just a couple of robots fighting or this, but then the moment where there's an expression change or just a character looking sad, and that's the shot that sticks with you. So even though at the time the artist that was assigned it doesn't think it's an amazing shot, to a lot of people it was their favorite shot, or it's a shot that made them like that film, or it's the changing point in that film that made the story make sense. So
what movie or movies encouraged you to embrace this industry? It's not necessarily a movie, could be a manga, could be anything.
A bit of everything. I think growing up, Lion King played a big role in my wanting to be an animator.
Okay.
I think that and Aladdin were the two big ones growing up.
I know you worked in the first Lion King. Have you worked in Aladdin?
I didn't work on Aladdin, sadly. But that's why I kind of had to work on Lion King. At the time, I'd gone to ILM. I was working in Singapore, and I kind of had a sense that MPC was going to get Lion King because they did Jungle Book, and that was quite successful. But I said to myself, I don't care which studio eventually gets it. The one that gets it, I'm going to go. Because that movie played such a pivotal, it made such a big impact on me growing up. It's something that it's the reason why I wanted to be an animator. Like, it's something that's fake, something that does not exist at all, but it generated real emotions.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And it wasn't like real people on the screen. It was just something completely drawn from somebody's imagination. And, that film went through not just one emotion, it went through all the emotions. It made you laugh, it made you cry, it made you sad, it just everything. And then just kind of understanding that you could do that with art was pretty cool. Yeah,
the sky is the limit. Or that makes sense.
Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah. And then the moment Toy Story came out, I was like, well,
oh wow,
that's the other thing. That is well, I know what I need to study now. I know what I need to do.
Yeah, great. Yeah, what me was I think it's classic. It's like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park. That I think it's especially people in FX or it's mainly those movies. My generation at least.
I loved those movies growing up.
Yeah, but
I didn't realize it was I didn't realize it was a career path. That didn't make me think I could do it.
No, true, but me too. I mean, because when I watched those movies, I was quite young. But later on, those movies pushed me to look for it. How we can do this.
Because those two movies, I think, still stand up today. They're incredible.
That still works.
They're absolutely amazing.
There is movies that got released 10 years ago that look crap comparing to those two that was done like 30 years ago.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. Sometimes still wondering why. I mean, sometimes why the quality went that down for some movies, and it's not about the movie. It's not about the money. It's more about managing how do you manage the money. It's not necessarily how much money you have. I mean, I don't know. Have you seen lately Ring of Power? I don't know. Heard of Ring of Power?
Yeah, I think we watched. What was the last episode? Episode 6, maybe yesterday.
Okay.
So just about catching up. Yeah.
I don't know, but I don't know what we thought about it. But I thought it was too expensive for what it is. It's 250 million per episode, which is a lot.
That's still It's a lot. Actually, sorry, I got it confused. I finished watching Rings of Power already.
Okay.
I keep getting that confused with the new Game of Thrones, House of the Dragons.
House of the Dragons. Yeah.
Both of them I find a little bit disappointing.
Even House of Dragons, I did not watch it yet. Okay.
A little bit, not because of the work though. I think the work is good.
No, I mean Ring of Power, the work is good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The storytelling is not there, in my opinion, because for me, the money is not justified. If that makes sense, the 250 million per episode. I don't know.
It's justified if enough people will watch it. Like you're worth as much as people are willing to pay you, right? This is a common saying. And it's the same for, the stuff you create for people to watch. And, I find a lot of, there's a white Kanye West t-shirts that sell for like plain white t-shirt. It'll sell for £150.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
really?
It's just a plain white t-shirt. You can't tell it apart from an H&M one if you put them next to each other. There's a market for it.
Yeah,
People
of course.
So
there is a market for everything, of course. But I know. I see exactly your point.
Yeah.
No, of course. But I think, sometimes some indie producers are struggling massively, and they have very good storytelling, and they're very good writers. And some others, I don't know. I think, in my opinion, sometimes, not everyone, of course, some of them not necessarily deserve it and have the money to do crazy things. But unfortunately, it looks like that. I don't know why, but it's not up to the expectations.
I think that's kind of one of the problems. Visual effects allows you to do absolutely anything, but doesn't mean you should do absolutely anything. I
agree.
It doesn't really, it shouldn't be the story.
That's the problem for me with, I'm not a big fan of Marvel movies, but the fifth phase, it's even worse now, because you feel like, it's just, it's like no taste, blunt, it's very, very like...
I like them.
The fifth phase, not.
Oh, the latest stuff.
Yeah,
it's getting a little bit bland. But I'm a big comic book fan. I've spent far too much money on comic books. I read a lot growing up, and Marvel was a big reason for that. It was more than films or anything. It was a thing that I can associate with more, especially the X-Men.
Of course. But you see what I like the X-Men because Fox did a great job with it, and I loved Logan, for instance.
I meant the comics. I meant the original comic. I loved them because of what they meant. They were like these people that were born that couldn't control, where they were born, how they were born. They just happened to be different, and they were persecuted for it. And some, lashed out and say, well, why are we being persecuted, and try to be aggressive to the persecutors, and others are actually trying to go down the more peaceful route. And that's why I kind of really associate with it, because I always felt different growing up. And it was like, they're just like me. They have powers. I don't have powers, but I understand the feeling of that. I understand the struggle, and, I don't know who is right, whether it's Professor X or Magneto, because I see both sides of the
of course argument. And I agree with you in some sense, because we both are European from different background, and sometimes we don't necessarily feel like we blend in, or we are part of our new home, if that makes sense. For you, Britain; for me, France. And I see like the sense of they, in a way, they look like me. I could see myself in those heroes, or I know. I totally get this. No, sorry, my point earlier was about when you compare the movies. Like, for instance, what Fox did with the X-Men in general, or what the first Iron Man was good. For example, the first Guardians of the Galaxy was very funny, and I enjoyed watching it, even if I'm not a big comic book fan. I mean, Marvel fan, if I can say this, because growing up in France for me was more like Tintin or other comics, different comic books.
Asterix and Obelix.
Asterix and Obelix, and Anki Bilal, so different, Moebius, So it was different. I mean, we had, of course, and manga, a lot of manga.
I still read a lot of manga.
It's growing up in France, the Japanese culture it's present. They have a big place in the country. We have, of course, we have access to, of course, as everyone, as everywhere, to American comic books or Marvel or DC comic books. But I don't know. Growing up, I was more like I took another route. So, since you talk directly with the client, right? Do you need feedback? Of course, let's say you worked on the first Lion King, let's say, and you converse or talk a lot with the client. Do you still need feedback from the VFX soup as an animation supervisor?
It really depends on the show. If it's a show like Lion King where it is basically an animated feature, you deal directly with the client side animation supervisor and the director, and your only real interaction with the visual effects supervisor is to for how we're technically going to deliver this, but it's never really feedback on the performances.
I see what you mean.
Whereas on a show that's more effects heavy and there's only a few animated shots, there isn't really a client side anim director, or you won't necessarily go straight to the director themselves. It'll be via the VFX supervisor. So it really depends on the project and how it's kind of set up.
So it's like animation in a company. It looks like a separate entity to a movie. It's like you run everything by yourself. It's like your own studio in a way, like because you speak directly to the client. For instance, in FX or lighting or other departments, maybe in comp. I think in comp, compositor supervisors, most of the time they speak directly with the client as well. But for us, I mean, we speak, but not as much. I don't think we speak or like communicate as much as you guys in animation do. So do you think like it looks like it's a separate entity or separate? It's like a studio in a studio. I don't know if they to simplify.
Yeah, it's like a family. It's you need your siblings.
Yeah,
because everyone does a certain job in the family to make sure that you're all fed and stuff. Yeah. But you have your job. I think we need to do our job. We need to make sure that the performances read, and this is the story the director wants to tell with these characters. So we're kind of completely focused on that. But then you cannot not have a relationship with the assets department,
of course,
and because they need to make these characters look and move and behave the way you need them to when you animate them, and then you also can't ignore the downstream departments, where we put our footsteps. If it's like a sandy environment, then that immediately dictates to like the effects department where to put the foot interaction and stuff like that.
Tell me about it.
And it's a lot. It's one extra footprint is a lot more work.
Yeah,
and
of course.
It's more money we're spending to make it look good.
Yeah, no, that's true.
It's a combination of what you have in the budget, what the client wants, and then working together to provide something that looks cool. There's a lot of times where you get kickbacks from downstream departments, whether it's tech anim or effects or lighting or comp, because even though from the camera view everything looks okay, but it might not work well in 3D space for the simulations that are needed down the line. So there is a lot of interaction still, but we're not dictated to in terms of how we animate really, or how to tell the story. That's directly from the client.
Yeah, okay. So in a sense, you communicate massively with the client, but of course to make sure everything works as it should be downstream, of course you need good communication inside the company, so everything goes as it should be, to other departments.
Yeah, and it's important for us to communicate with other departments to make sure that, because sometimes the messages that the client has told us about what's important to the shot, they don't get, and they might hide something because they haven't been passed that information. So we always have to check on the shots downstream to make sure that it's still telling the story that it needs. Like if you spent all this time doing this this interaction on the left side of the screen, for instance, but then the next time you see it, environments have put a bush there that hides that, and the director specifically said they want to see that, then you have to communicate that to them and make sure that that's there, and like this is an important part of the story, so it needs to be visible. Put your bush behind the characters or so on. So
So when animation happened, does animation have? I mean, you guys start working as soon as the layout is done, or how?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, we need the layout. We need the at least the animation surface. So the rest of the environment can still be worked on, but the part that we know that the characters are definitely going to interact with, based off of the previous, and the, the kickoff, what the directors told us that needs to happen in the show, we need that to start with. And then other than that, it's just the layout and the rigs. So the characters need to be built and need to be able to do everything we need them to do. So if they're talking, you need like a nice, in visual effects, most of the time we use fax-based face rigs. So fax is the facial action coding system. So it's built off of human anatomy and human muscle structure. And that's the way that, the controls move on the face to kind of emulate human muscles. And the combinations of using them is how we get the different emotions to read. Oftentimes in full CG movies, you don't necessarily have, that same system, that same rig layout that moves only in like limited directions. So like muscles only really act, most of the time only act in one direction, except for, like your orbital muscles in your mouth ones. But everything's like pulling in one direction and tensing in one place. But on full CG face rigs, you can move any part of the face pretty much anywhere. So you do whatever you need to do to tell that specific part of the story, and you can break, physics with it because they're not relying on that for the type of story that they want to tell.
Okay, nice. Thanks for explaining this.
Yeah,
it's very helpful. How much an animator needs to know about rigging? Oh, sorry. What's rigging first, so people can know?
So if you think of animators as puppeteers, we're the people moving the strings, we're the people that make the little puppet move around. The riggers are the ones that attach the strings. They are the ones that create the puppet for us to actually manipulate and get it to perform and to act. So they're incredibly important. They kind of tend to build our rigs based off of where the anatomy would be. So if it's a real world animal, they'd study real world, like a cat, and try to build a skeleton of a real cat and make sure that the muscles are attached in the same place, that the joints are in the right position. So when we do manipulate like the arm, move it up and down, it bends in the right place. You get the right amount of deformation down the shoulder, down the back, and everywhere else that's attached. If it's a fantastical creature, something that doesn't exist, they take, influence from the creatures that are closest to it. So we spoke earlier about House of the Dragon. So with dragons, you look at birds, you look at bats, you look at lizards, you look at anything that kind of looks similar to them, and you try to build the anatomy off of that. But then it's also like there's a lot of backwards and forwards with animation and rigging, where rigging always wants to stay perfectly anatomically correct. Oftentimes, from what the director or the clients have stated, that character needs to move in a way that isn't completely anatomically correct. So you have to feed back and you have to work really closely together to make sure all those joint positions are in the right place for what you need to do, and it moves in the way that you need it to tell that story.
So if an animator have an issue with a rig, usually it goes back to rigging. You guys so we not try to fix it in your end.
On every show I've worked on, we have multiple rigging meetings a week, so it's consistent. It kind of dies down a little bit towards the end of the show, but there's always some kind of rigging presence, because there's always something we need the rig to do or something to change to get it done. Generally, most animators starting out probably don't really need to know that much about rigging. But when you kind of get a bit more senior, when you start giving feedback on how the rigs are made, then it's vital, because you need to know what's not necessarily the technicality of how the rig is made, more about muscle placement, joint placement, how it should behave and move, and understand when the rig is broken or when it's, you're not using it in the correct way.
I see.
So knowing that definition helps you give rigging feedback. Yeah, and you don't always know that when you first start out. So it's amazing. Sometimes we've had some generalists who have a bit of an understanding of everything. We've had some guys who used to be riggers that have, you know, switched discipline to become animators, and they're always useful every time you have one of those people on your team, because you just turn to them and like, how do I fix this? What's wrong? What's the feedback I need to give? Because sometimes you know something is wrong, but you also don't know how to communicate that. So yeah,
of course,
it's really useful.
It's very handy to have someone in your team who have let's say journalist background. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. We are probably the two departments that work the closest together. But it's still useful having someone that knows some lighting, someone who knows some effects, someone who knows some compositing on the animation team, because then you get a broader view of what we need and what's possible downstream and upstream to actually deliver the best shot we can, deliver the best film we can, or TV show, or whatever it is we're working on commercial.
What's the best polygon flow for an animator? Like how the polygon should look like, more or less, to make sure that you can bend it, you can work with it. Can you work with? Sorry to interrupt. Could you work with triangles or quads or?
It doesn't matter for us. Most of the characters are quads in VFX and characters. In games, it was. It used to be triangulated, but I'm not sure now. I know environments, when displacement is added, they get triangulated, but they all build in quads as well. For us, it doesn't really matter. We don't get into the details of like how how many polygons there are, or the topology itself, other than the flow lines, because they dictate the way that the muscles move and the way that the mass moves around the face. So we look more at the movement of mass rather than individual polygons or individual faces.
I see. Yeah. That's what you mean. So you use Maya, right? That's the
predominantly Maya. Yes. There's a few more people starting to use Houdini to kind of bring things
for animation. I know it's used in rigging a lot, but
not to animate with, but more every time especially in previs or when you're doing pitch work and stuff like that. It's useful to know a little bit of Houdini, just because then you can do some simple effects to help sell your story.
True. And
even in finals, it might not be the final effect, but sometimes it really helps to sell the idea to the client, timing, if you can give the timing ideas and the general look of what the final shot is going to look like. More and more so, we're using a lot more Unreal as well. So that is becoming quite a big thing, especially kind of when you can integrate the Unreal workflow with the Maya workflow. So you get your animation out of Maya, but then you can pump it into Unreal, because Unreal basically allows you to do it allows your clients to go into a virtual production mode, put on their VR goggles, and really film their film as if it was a live action film, which has made visual effects a lot more accessible to a lot more directors. It means a lot more work for us, sadly, but it kind of does open up this idea of a client, a director can visualize like where the character is going to be, because they can actually walk around them and see where am I going to place my camera. If this was a real actor, like I place it here, I move it there, I do this and that, how am I going to light it? And then we can actually take all of that information and pump it back into Maya. And we know, okay, the DOP, the director, they've set the lighting, they've set the mood, so we don't need to guess where the sun is, because they've told us where it is. We know the cameras that they want to do, because they've filmed their cameras themselves, so we've got all of that information. There are always tweaks that are made, because the previs is never the same as the final thing, and sometimes they pass you something, but the brief in the kickoff is actually different. They're like, this is the shot, but what we really want to tell is this. So there is always camera changes, there's always animation changes. You're never going to stick 100% to the performance that was delivered in previs, but that's the kind of, I strayed a little bit away from what the question was. But it kind of shows you that there's a bit of a mix of software solutions that is useful to know. Other studios have their own software. I think Pixar have their proprietary animation software. DreamWorks, I think, is the same. But at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's a screwdriver.
Of course.
You know how it should work, and as long as you understand the theory, you can switch to another one. It's not going to be
the
too
principles.
difficult.
How we build things. How the same in effect. Well, it takes longer now if you are, for instance, if you are a Houdini user, and I don't know how many companies still use Maya, for instance, for effects, but I don't think there is there is too many companies using Maya for effects. But I mean, if you know how the particle is supposed to be moving around, I mean, you could of course replicate with any software. Of course, you need the time to understand, to look for it and know where it is. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing, more or less.
Yeah,
it might take longer, of course, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. So it's very similar. If you can write your name with the Bic or with the Reynolds, it's the same. I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
it's a tool to write. It's a pen to write a name. I'm of course oversimplifying it, but it's as you said, it's a screwdriver. It depends on how you use it. As long as you know the theory and the principles, I think
it's transferable.
Yeah, definitely. I'm still using. Sometimes still thinking way of doing stuff in Maya, for instance, or XSI, because I started with Lightwave and then XSI, then
Cinema 4D and
I did not use Cinema 4D, but no, I think never. Have you used it?
No, I was straight up Maya from the start.
I used the Lightwave and then XSI. I loved XSI, especially Ice. And I hate Autodesk for killing it,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of software, Softimage or XSI, because it used to be called XSI, then Autodesk bought it and they called it Softimage. Anyways. What I'm trying to say is, Ice in XSI was super powerful, and a lot of XSI or Softimage users switched directly to Houdini. They said, no, we're not going to Maya, going straight away to Houdini. And I think, in my opinion, a lot of Maya users, Houdini, FX artists, got pissed and switched completely to Houdini.
I mean, even animators, if we need to do some effects, we'll jump into Houdini.
We'll
export it out into Maya.
It's easier and Alembic or any extension, you can do whatever you want. It's easier, It's not easy, but it's easier to manipulate things, and it makes more sense when you understand how to do it.
Yeah. I do feel that Maya is a little bit cumbersome.
Yeah.
It's maybe trying to do a bit too much, and it doesn't do anything well anymore.
I think for rigging, because you can extensively, for instance, use Python, or it's the same in Houdini, but it makes sense, especially if you're a big company and you have your tools already in Maya. It's very hard to switch from Maya to Houdini. It's gonna take some time.
Yeah.
Even I don't know. I'm not a future. I don't predict the future, but I think at some point even animators will be using Houdini for animation. Maybe in 5 to 10 years. I don't know, but
I don't know. I actually think it is probably going to be more straight to Unreal.
You think straight away? Oh yeah, true. I did not thought about that. Yeah.
I mean, it's not as I think intuitive yet, but it's faster and you get much better results like earlier in terms of the look. So if the animation pipeline side can be improved and some of the tooling there, I think why wouldn't you? Especially if you don't have to incorporate the bridge between Maya and Unreal when you go to virtual production.
True.
You just everything is in one software.
Since you're talking about Unreal, and I know in previews they use it a lot, how much you can? Is it possible to recycle animation for instance, from previews to final anime?
It never used to be.
Okay.
So on, I think, the first Lion King and on Prehistoric Planet and stuff like that, when it was Unity, I think we used actually.
Prehistoric Planet. I think it's Unity.
So you can make everything in Maya, and then you can put it into Unreal for the virtual production part of it. But it was very hard to get that information back out. And now I think there's more and more bridges between, not necessarily Unity, because I think we're using more Unreal now, but that we get those same, curves back. You get the FBX data, you know where those joint positions are, so you can actually reuse the cameras. You can reuse the animation, or at least use it as a base, so you know where everything is. But that also relies on you having that information. A lot of previous that is done is not the same company as doing the post.
That's true. That's
true. So sometimes what's delivered is just the plate. So then you really can't reuse anything, except for maybe trying to use it as a guide and guess the depth, because you don't also know the scales and proportions that they made their models. So your finals might be different. So relative to where they've placed their models in their environment, how much of this, the frame they take up, it might be completely different. So recreating that shot, it might not look identical. Whereas now we can one-to-one it, because we can just get all of that information.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because the reason why I'm asking is I've seen some incredible previews, and when you see, okay, this is good enough for, almost a post-viz animation,
Yeah, it is. It's very much post-viz.
Yeah, and then it's wasted, if that makes sense, in my opinion, because if, I don't know, you take this as a very experienced animator, and you push it to the next level because you already have a base. I don't know, I'm just, dreaming in my head maybe, but
You can. I think it depends on the information you're getting back, because sometimes what's needed and what's necessary to tell the story in previs doesn't work in post. They might not have taken real world physics into it. They might have, used a human
scale.
You can use mocap data on pretty much any creature now. You can retarget it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will move like how that creature does move, because the weight is different. It's based off of a human. The gait is different, all of that stuff. So you might have to actually rebuild it and start from scratch anyways. But at least you know where it is where that character's supposed to be in the frame. The acting choices, because a lot of that is kind of there. It is a lot more work, because the previs quality now is so high that it's incredible. But that's what also makes it more accessible to the directors. You can't. Back in the day, you could actually deliver stuff as a stepped animation, so on 2s, on 4s, on 10s, or
animated cubes,
and you could deliver that, and you're like, okay, cool, that's enough to go off, because they also had the storyboards, and then they'd wait to see in post. But now, if they're going to see it, especially if it's a director or a client that's not really experienced with visual effects, they need it as close to the final as possible to really understand where they want to place their cameras, make sure they know the storytelling elements before it even comes to us. So it requires a higher quality, which means a lot more wasted work.
Yeah, it's incredible. But
but it's not wasted, actually.
No, I'm sorry.
If it gets the director to their vision faster,
of course,
it's better.
No.
It's just a shame for the artists.
Yes, that's what. Because that's what I meant by. Of course, no, it's not wasted. Of course, as you said, it's doing the job. Without previs, we won't be able to do post-vis, and it won't be as clear as. It won't be as clear as maybe previs of 10 years ago. So even like 5 years ago. So no, of course, it's very important to have a very good quality previs to help the director tell his story, and most importantly, explaining what the director is after. But then my only part why I'm just saying it's forget what I wanted to say is wasted is just because they are so good. Why starting from scratch? That's my only. That's it. But no, of course, it's not wasted. Not at all. It's very, very important. It's like having a script or a storyboard or previs. And nowadays, especially for very high-end animation, it's very important to have to be spot on and know exactly what we are doing.
Yeah, I think it's more important than it used to be as well, just because of the explosion of of visual effects as well, which means that even if we're getting the same amount of time for projects that we used to, there are less actual experienced people in it to go around all these shows.
Yeah, true.
So it means that if they've got a good understanding of what the shot needs to tell from the previs, they can get it to final earlier rather than experiment. And if you've got a lot of junior talent on your team, I mean, I'm sure they're not going to stay junior for a long time, especially in today's climate. But it does mean that it's going to take more time than it would with the more senior talent we would have had with fewer shows going on at the same time, you know, even pre-COVID. So it's crazy the amount of companies that are kind of sprung up and how many shows are getting greenlit, where it's before it never used to be this kind of struggle to hire.
Yeah, this is incredible. Never seen this before.
Yeah, which is, it's made it a huge artist. It's a great time to be in the industry if you're starting. There's lots of jobs, and even in London, there were the 3 or 4 big companies, but it was only ever like 1, maybe 2 big shows. Now every company you go to has something cool to work on.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's great. Back on the days it was like Harry Potter. I think everyone was sharing Harry Potter. For like a decade almost, you know, like a DNEG, Framestore, the usual suspects, you know, MPC, you know, and some other small companies. Now it's unbelievable. I think, Harry Potter changed the industry in the UK. I think because
that might be, going back to like our first question, that might be one of the reasons why full CG didn't take off as much, because Harry Potter actually made visual effects explode in the UK.
It's unbelievable, like from one day to another. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it was so quick. Because, for instance, in France, animation companies like Illumination or Micros or so on and so forth, there is so many. We have VFX companies in France, for instance, but not as many as in the UK, and they're not as prominent as in the UK. And the opposite is true for animation studios. It looks like we invested more, you know, in France toward, you know, animation project like I don't know, Despicable Me or.
It might be even before that, because you look at the history of the 2D art forms in Europe, you know, there's, from the UK you have Dennis the Menace, Beano, but not really that big outside of the UK. But then you have these huge, like, behemoths from, you know, Europe. You've got your Tintins, you've got your Asterix and Obelix, you've got all of these big projects. Moomins, I think, was French as well, right?
Which one?
Moomins? Was that French?
I don't know.
But
I don't ever heard of it.
In general, I think that's, you know, you need to see that that's kind of a path you can take. And actually having a lot of this art come from France, especially, you know, people were pushed to, you know, think, this is something I could do growing up. Before it was just 2D comics, and then it came cartoons, and then it became full CG, whereas here there wasn't that. There was a lot more influence on live actions. Whether it was like soap operas or any of that stuff. And growing up in the UK, you know, all the cartoons were French, Japanese, or American. There weren't really that many that were British. It kind of makes sense now that there isn't a big CG.
Well, when you think that Star Wars were partly built or done in the UK as well, so this is in a way choose the path on, you know, where it was headed since the 70s. You know? Because Lucas chose Pinwood, I think, and even I think the music, some part of the music was recorded in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it makes sense, actually. It makes sense that there is more VFX companies in the UK than animation studios. There were an attempt of having Micros around, but this did not last for long.
I think DNEG now has.
There is a section of feature animation at DNEG.
And there's companies like Jellyfish and
Blue Zoo
and stuff like that doing a lot of full CG stuff. And I think there will be a time where you can, I mean, with work from home, you can pretty much do it anywhere
Yeah,
as well.
of course.
So that's great. That's really helped the industry. But yeah, it makes sense now why there isn't a big CG industry here.
Yeah. What do you think about the work conditions in general? You've been around a lot. You worked at big companies with ILM, MPC, so on and so forth. I think you worked at Sega as well.
Yeah, I started at Sega, but as a games tester. Because when I first actually graduated, I was, I wanted to work in film, but I was happy to work in games as well. And that kind of experience wasn't the greatest.
But did you work in games as an animator?
No, just as a games tester.
Okay,
so I was thinking about basically progressing that way, and I thought at the time, 2 or 3 junior positions a year would open up in the studio.
Yeah,
so your best route towards becoming an animator was video games. And I tried to kind of get in that way, and I was there for about 6 months. I was working my way up. I was a lead on a couple of games there, and then wanted to get into the development side. And I got a call from Michael Eames, who was the head of animation at Framestore at the time, who is again now. And he said I could offer you, because he actually used to work with my lecturer at university back in the day at ILM. They did Small Soldiers and a bunch of other shows like that together, and he used to come down and actually give us feedback on our work.
Nice.
So when this position came up, he said, we've got a position on The Tale of Despero, but I can only offer you a 1-month contract.
Wow.
And I had like this permanent job at Sega. I think things are going well, I can get into development, or do I want to take my one chance?
Wow.
And do 1 month of film, which is where I kind of wanted to end up anyways. I thought, you know what, even if it's just 1 month, I'm going to give it everything. I'm going to go and I'm going to learn everything I can.
Oh, you resigned from Sega and went to work at Framestore?
Yeah, I just took this 1 month contract, and then 1 month turned into 4.5 years. He just kept getting extended and stayed on, did quite a few shows there, and it was great. Like
nice. Getting
in that early, because there was a lot of talented people there, and it's not something I'd advocate today, but like I used to stay late all the time, just try to work on my stuff. I used to just go on, not because it's not good to be, to want to learn, but I don't really agree with working late. Yeah. So I'd stay, I'd study other people's shots, I'd ask people questions, I'd be like, I've only got 1 month, I'm going to learn as much as I can in this 1 month and try to develop and just get better. And yeah, I was very fortunate to stay there for that long. And then I thought, it was just after Gravity actually, I thought, all right, I've been here for a while, I haven't left the UK, I haven't been to another studio, should I try something else? Applied to MPC, ended up going there and doing a short stint in commercials. Just did one commercial, is for 3, the mobile phone company, and it was a moonwalking pony.
Ah, yeah, I remember this. That was super cool.
It was really fun. Yeah. It was really fun to do, and it was just 3 of us on it. And it
that's the only commercial I still remember from that pony was amazing.
Yeah, it was great. Like I remember when we started it, and the director, I think initially they had this real pony, and they're like, we only need like 2 or 3 shots for CG, and we're going to train the pony, and we're going to do all this stuff. And then they came back, and they're like, okay, we need some more VFX shots. And then by the end of it, there was only like, I think 1 shot of the real pony. The rest of it was funny.
Everything was CG. That's amazing.
Yeah, but it was a really fun experience. And then after that, I did Maleficent, went over to film, did Maleficent at MPC. And
we worked in a lot of shows together, but we never met then.
Yeah.
Because I worked on Maleficent as well.
Really?
Yeah. I was I was not starting, but I was in the industry for like 2 or 3 years, something like that. Right. Yeah, when I joined, because I joined MPC in 2013, I was already in the industry for like a couple of years. Yeah, I worked in Maleficent, but before that, it was Percy Jackson too.
Yeah, that was happening at the same time
Yeah,
as
it was a
Maleficent,
nightmare.
yeah.
And then after that, 300.
Right, yeah.
What's the name again?
And Exodus was the same time as that as
yeah,
well.
it was
it?
all. Yeah, it was our. We inherit some of those shows from Rhythm Hughes when they unfortunately got bankrupt, I think. So yeah, I mean. Yeah, so yeah, we because you worked on Jungle Book, I worked on Jungle Book.
Yeah.
You worked on Lion King, I worked on Lion King.
Yeah.
So we worked on
on the same projects.
But yeah, here we go.
Yeah, but in between, I'd go to other places and come back. And stuff, so, yeah.
So what other places did you work on?
After Maleficent, I ended up going to New Zealand and worked on at Weta on Planet of the Apes.
Oh wow, that was amazing.
The second Planet of the Apes film. It was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and then I worked on The Hobbit as well. Just part 3, which is it was quite a fun experience actually. And then I started working on Jungle Book there.
Wow, okay.
So I was doing
at Weta.
At Weta, yeah.
Okay.
So I was doing the previs for the King Louis sequence.
Oh wow, yeah, nice.
And then I thought to myself, actually, MPC has the rest of the film.
Yeah.
I've just done a movie of entirely apes.
Yes. You wanted to do something
another
else.
year and a half of just apes. So I came back to London, rejoined MPC and did Jungle Book.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was quite fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I loved working on that movie. It was real fun. It was hard, but was real fun. And
yeah.
And is that true? At Weta, they have a button called Ape, and just click on it, and
it just drops from nowhere. I wish.
No, I was just joking because I remember back in the days, seeing some tests of Ape in Planet of the Apes, like the very first one, and it was mind blowing. I mean, everything was amazing.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like all the studios. There's parts of them I dislike, but I do think everyone should go everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you get an opportunity, definitely go to Weta. It's a pretty cool place to be.
Mm-hmm.
The work obviously speaks for itself. They have an incredible facial animation department there. Some of the performances they do, it's mind blowing. And then. And you get to experience another part of the world. So for me, travel and culture and being in different places is quite important. Nice. I went there. I was there for 15 months, I think, and then came back to London, did Jungle Book, and then I remember being on Google Chat with a friend of mine. It was during the work day. He was working in Singapore ILM. And he was like, "Hey Al, have you, what do you think about working in Singapore and ILM?" I was like, "Oh yeah, cool, sounds good." Like hypothetically, yeah, one day, sure, why not? And then 5 minutes later, I got a phone call from the recruiter there. I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you meant like now." So I was like,
"Slow down."
Yeah. So we got to the end of Jungle Book, and I thought, actually, this is a cool opportunity as well. I'm still young. I still don't have a family or anything like. There's any responsibilities really. Yeah. So while I've got this, I'm going to go and experience that, and it's a new studio, and it's I get to live in Asia for a while, so that was pretty fun. Nice. Did another year and a half there, and then ended up what I was saying before about lying. Like whichever studio gets it, I'm going to go. So the moment that kind of started, I was like, I'm going to go back to London. Sorry.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there specialties in animation? For example, in FX, we have some people are, especially in big studios, you have water specialists. They can do everything, but they're more, specialized on doing water, or specialized on doing fire or explosions or so on and so forth. Is it similar in animation? You have, for instance, someone specialized in, facial animation. Yeah,
there's different kind of levels of specialization. So I think the biggest two, I guess, would be visual effects and full CG are kind of different. Not everybody can do either.
Okay. I thought it was easy transition.
the style is quite different, and what's important, I think, is a bit different in both. Even though the principles are the same, the requirements are kind of a little bit different there.
But what do you have to do first? Do you have to be in VFX first and then go to animation, or vice versa?
You can do either, and some people are great at both. Some people are only good at one and cannot do the other one. And it's really dependent on how kind of your brain works, and like what your preference as well, and the type of animation you like to do as well. And then even within both of them, they're split up again. We have some people that like to do more, performance character stuff. Some people like to do the more actiony stuff. Some people love working on the Marvel movies and the Transformers movies, and other people like the Paddingtons. And, they're more kind of character full stuff. And then you do have a lot of animators who hate doing facial performance, and they just want to do body acting and miming, and they want to do the more kind of physical animation. And then you have others who also just don't want to touch the body. I just want to do the face. So you have like companies like Weta who have a specific facial department, and those guys only animate faces.
Wow. Okay.
And then you've got other people that only animate the body, and you've got people that do both and stuff. So it's nice in a way that, like, no matter what you like, there's a company and there's a place and there's a project for you. So that's pretty cool. And if you like everything, you can do one project here, one project there, and move around and change.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And some people don't even like animating, characters. They prefer animating like rigid body stuff. So you get people doing like cars and trucks and all of that kind of stuff.
What's it called again? Transformers, or the other show.
Fast and the Furious.
Fast and the Furious. Here we go.
Yeah. So there's something that's different for everyone can find their own place. So in a way, it's inclusive, which is nice.
That's great.
Who
animates the cameras? Is it a layout or animation or both?
Both, sometimes neither. Again, it depends on...
virtual production.
So with virtual production, you can get a camera that you never have to touch. On more on more traditional VFX projects where there isn't the virtual production part, it'll be, the layout will set up the camera, will set up the scene. If it's a shot that's has a plate, you're kind of pretty much locked with the camera. So the camera has to be match moved and matching the live action camera. If it's a full CG shot, then layout will generally do a pass of it. A lot of time it'll be fine, and you don't have to touch it. And sometimes you'll get direction, or what's happening with the characters dictates that the camera has to change, so then animation changes it. And then even after all of that's done, there might be 2D moves in comp done to accentuate certain things, to add camera shake, to zoom in, and all that kind of stuff. So it's hard to say that one department solely does the animation, the cameras. It can be all of them. It can be one of them. It can be, a combination.
What's a re-rack?
So a re-rack is a 2D move on a camera. So you've already got your camera filmed, and let's say it's a 4K film, so it's like that much, but the actual film is only 2K, so using this much of it. So the re-rack is like, I want to use the top half of it or something, so you move it up or you move it down, you want to move it to left or right. You can have it animated through the shot, so it re-racks throughout it. But what doesn't change is the perspective, because you're basically moving it on a 2D image. Whereas if you did it in 3D, the way that the perspective would change, so the way that the characters line up against each other is going to be slightly different, rather than just shifting it left or right or up or down. Does that make sense? Is that
completely?
Cool.
What's a pre-roll actually?
So pre-roll is something that's added at the beginning of animation. So let's say you have a shot that is 300 frames long, starts at 1001 and finishes at 1301. Your pre-roll would happen before the first, frame of the cut. So if the first frame of the cut is 1001, you'd have animation before that, which helps to define the simulations that happen afterwards. So whether it's groom or whether it's effects. Sometimes you need animation before what you actually see on screen to dictate the moving parts that are on screen. So if there's, when you cut into a shot and there's debris already flying in from the left, you need to kind of define where that debris started from before the shot starts. Or if a character's moving, in order to have them not kind of static on frame one and then suddenly see the hair all go in the direction that they're moving for the rest of the shot, you need their momentum to be traveling through it. So you add pre-roll is like animation before the shot starts.
How difficult is it to do it?
If it's just generic pre-roll, like a character coming from T-pose into where they need to move, that can be automated. You can set it up in the shot context. So basically every shot has a pre-roll of, you define the number of frames for the pre-roll, and that's done, so no one has to do it manually. If there's a specific move and you need to match specific kind of momentum, then animators can also animate the pre-roll and do that as a part of their release for the downstream departments. So it really depends on what the shot needs and how the show itself is set up.
Let's say a shot is approved from animation, and for some reason it needs pre-roll. Is it more, of course we're not talking about specifics, and of course some shot sequences requires specific things, but imagine it's like Simba walking and we need like an extra 50 or 100 frames. How easy it is to add those ones after the shot is approved?
From a technical point of view, it doesn't take a long time to add that. From a scheduling point of view, it's if you haven't accounted for that in the schedule, if production haven't allowed for that, then it's finding the time to actually do that whilst also doing your shot work. So it's not hard as long as it's accounted for. It's quite a simple process, because the actual, depending on which studio you're at as well, the way you release things is different.
Of course, yeah.
And how long that takes is also different. Some studios you can do a release and it's actually with downstream within the hour. Other studios, the release process can take up to a day, sometimes even longer, depending on the complexity of the shot and how busy the farm is and lots of different things. So even though it's relatively simple to actually achieve, if you don't have the time to do it, or if you don't have the people to do it, because the project hasn't been scheduled in that way,
of course,
then it's going to add more delays on top of the actual release process and actual doing it as well.
That's why it has to be required before even starting the sequence, I think. So at least it's scheduled and everyone knows about it. So when you have it at the end of when the shot is published, it's easier to move forward with that, because you have it already included.
Ideally, like you have all of this stuff defined at the beginning.
Of course.
And if you know that every shot in your film needs pre-roll, or your TV show or whatever it is you're doing, then you have that already set in the requirements when you start a shot. So you never have to ask for it. It should be there. If it's just a simple one going from T-pose, or if it's just a character moving in one direction, that can be automated. If it's more complicated than that, then it needs to be a part of the brief to the animation department, so they know to always include it and then just release with it. Because it doesn't really hurt to add it. It's not going to take that much time from you to add. The only thing it's going to add is just, if you're adding pre-roll, it's a bit more, physical requirements in terms of disk space and all that stuff. But
I would say
should be minimal.
It's not a big deal, but still, I mean, you have to, as you well said, you have to schedule it and you have to prepare it, beforehand. So everything is, you have a smooth delivery, I would say, or a smoother delivery to make things easier across departments. Yeah.
The biggest issue in VFX is not the ability, it's the communication. It's huge. So as long as you have smooth communication and constant communication between departments and between production, things go smoothly.
Of course.
If you have a good production team, then everything is kind of run quite smoothly, and you can actually deliver on time if it's managed well. People, I think,
it's crucial actually.
Yeah, they don't really. A lot of studios, especially, I think, don't really understand how important production is. Me as a supervisor,
it's vital. Yeah.
I can deliver a project with junior talent if it's scheduled properly and I have a good production team. But I could have the very best animators on the planet, but if our production is a mess and our communication is a mess between different departments, because generally production is your link between the different departments as well.
Of course,
then that project isn't gonna do well.
Of course, totally agree. I mean, they're the glue. I mean, of our industry. You can't. I mean, people think, it's just filling sheets. No, they're not just filling sheets. It's a very hard job, and it's not easy to do well. I mean, especially. And it's very bad when you have like a feedback turning around for 2-3 days, and even the person who gave the feedback 3 days before don't remember, which is normal because you've seen, so as a supervisor, you've seen so many shots, you can specifically remember what you said that day and at that moment, and you said it rightly, I mean, for a specific reason, and you don't necessarily remember exactly what you had, what feedback you gave, and if this is not passed down the line as it should be, you lose 3 days or I don't know how many days, and then you have to see the shot again and give another feedback, and it's never the story without end.
yeah. I think when you're an artist as well, you don't really understand what they do. It's not until you get a little bit more seniority and you see more of what production do, then you're like, actually, they are incredibly vital.
I think this is that's what I dislike about our industry in general, is sometimes we don't sit back and try to, like, the new generation, in my opinion, doesn't know much about other departments. Like, they don't know much about, for instance, FX doesn't know much about lighting, compositing, animation, etc., etc. That's from my point of view, and I think
I don't think it's just the new. I think all of us. I don't think I know enough about the other departments. I don't think I know as much as I can know to help, like, give them everything that they need and for us to do our job properly. If it was me and I was setting up a company, I would make sure that every supervisor of every department spends time with a different department to at least see what their working day is like and what they go through, because even if you know what they do, the way it's done at different companies is different as well. So understanding the tools and like the constraints behind it, you can be like, I gave this note to rigging, a week ago. Why haven't they delivered it yet? Why haven't they done this? And you don't know what's actually happening and how long it takes them to turn that around and what else is kind of going on at the same time for them. And
well, it's like most of the CG soups in our industry are coming from lighting, for example. So of course, I mean, most of them knows a little bit of everything in the industry, but they don't know necessarily a lot, for instance, about animation or modeling. They might know, but not deep enough. And I think, for instance, especially for soups, not knowing how each department work, or how we should treat that department, because sometimes, for instance, when you say to someone where to do water simulation, you need 2 to 3 weeks. What? 2 to 3 weeks? Why do you need all this time? Well, this will depend on the company, because some companies you can do 3 iterations a day. Some other companies you can do 3 iterations a week. And the task would be done by a different person and a different level. So a junior artist, even if a water specialist junior artist, would take longer to do water than a senior artist with more knowledge. So the bidding differ, from one person to another, from one shot to another, from one company to another, etc., etc. So I agree. I mean, higher up, people should know more about, what, who is doing what and when and for what, and to make things easier for everyone, actually.
Yeah, because then you know what you're asking them to do when you ask them to do something, or and you know how long it takes, and you know how your decisions, like the ramifications of them to other departments. because when you don't know that, you're just in your own world and you're doing your own little thing, and you could be making someone's life very difficult for something that isn't actually that important. So understanding that, because you know they're spending all their efforts on this thing when they could actually be spending it on something that's way more important for the story or for what the client wants.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember some years ago spending, I don't know, 2 weeks in Grand Attraction, and then it was hidden behind the bushes. Because the bushes were done in comp, so I mean, it was a part of the plate, but it was not in the plate. So I did not see it, and my lead did not see it, and the CG did not see it. So we kept iterating, and then you see the comp, it's hidden. I mean, if you drop the task, you won't see it. So this is miscommunication and not knowing the full picture, because sometimes it's good to have the full picture, even do a test for each thing and then move on and do things properly.
I think for us, understanding the lighting earlier in animation is vital, because the way that a character reads, the way that emotion reads is different depending on how the light is hitting that character, and sometimes that information doesn't come to us until after the shot has already left us, and we're like, it doesn't read in the same way anymore. And sometimes, which has happened to me a few times as well, where you'll get a shot and you'll get notes on it and loads of notes, and then the shot comes back and it's pitch black and you can't see anything, and it's like, well, if we had a lighting pass earlier, we could have seen that, this was really dark, and we always knew it was nighttime, but the characters there, we assumed there was going to be some light shining on them. So
of course. How much farm do you need as an animator?
More than we get.
Is a play blast is not enough? It should be enough.
Well, usually there's some kind of project kind of hogging up most of the farm, because especially now that there's so many shows on, it's always being taken up. So even trying to get just a single daily out, which should take a minute, it actually takes an hour, because you just don't get the farm allocation. And it's a little bit difficult when you're trying to get these out to show a client and you have a client review, and I'm not getting my videos out. We've done the work, I just can't present it, and that means we lose a week before we get feedback, because it's not coming out on the farm.
Wow.
So for something that should take a minute, it's a little bit frustrating.
So you use the farm only for dailying? Do you use the farm? Do you play blast through the farm? Preview through the farm?
No, you play blast on your machine, and then to actually upload it to the system, that goes to the farm. So that's mainly what we need it for. That, and to also, depending on the studio, I mean, the release process is a bit different. At MPC, when you release your animation curves, the character that you animate with, that's a much lighter version of the rig than the one that actually passes downstream. So the one we animate with doesn't have any of the muscle information in there. It's just like a puppet with controls and some kind of deformation information. And then that basically gets bound to the high resolution rig on the farm with all the muscle information. All that simulation gets done on the farm, and then that gets cached out, and that's the one that passes downstream. So that all happens on the farm. So that process can take a while, which means that you can't publish your shots for downstream to pick up if the farm is busy. So there needs to be some allocation. Our scenes are much smaller than like an effects simulation.
That's why I'm asking, because
it's funny because you always get, this happens at every studio where you're like constant emails because they're running out of disk space. No matter what studio you're at, I've had this
everywhere.
Email.
It's everywhere.
Like, can everybody please go through and delete what they can? And you look at your animation folders and you've got, well, I've got 10 animation versions of this shot. I can probably delete the first 5 and keep 5 just in case. So that's 300 megabytes I've saved. And then you see like one water sim that's, a terabyte or something
at least.
Mine is just a drop in the ocean. It's not really doing anything.
It's a particle, Yeah. Your scene is the size of one of my particles.
Yeah. So then it's like, okay, well, if we had some that was dedicated to us, it would mean we could always make our client reviews. We can always get things out, and we can always publish to the rest of the department. But
it's weird. Sorry to interrupt. It's weird that some companies doesn't have this built in the local machine, because you don't need the farm you don't need the farm to publish, for the review. That makes sense.
You can render locally,
yeah.
But then that means you can't work on anything else because your machine is busy doing that.
Yeah, of course. So. But if the render is taking like a minute or two, it's not a big deal, Yeah. Of course, if it's the preview is taking like half an hour, If you have 10 characters running or something, it's
you can't cache to publish downstream, but you can definitely do your render out locally.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But then it's because everybody's so reliant on it going to the farms, because usually everybody has 2 or 3 shots working
of course,
at the same time. So they've got 3 Mayas open and they're kind of going between them. They send one to the farm, they work on something else in the meantime, and then we never know when the farm is going to be really busy. So then you suddenly have to tell, currently we might have 30 animators, but this show that I'm on at the moment is going to get up to like 100 plus. So then I have to tell every single one of those, you have to do this locally now to make it into this review. It's in a couple of hours rather than what they normally know.
Out of curiosity, how do you bid for an animation shot? What's the process?
The producer generally has the final bid. But they get your input. So the way that I do my bidding is I'll see the turnover, the edit that's been turned over. I have a look at each shot. I try to gauge their complexity based off of length, number of characters, type of animation that's needed, the level of interaction between the characters, and how close the camera is to them as well. So I'll kind of go in and gauge whether it's like a junior, mid-senior level shot, and how many days I think when I do bid, it's not how many days I think it would take me to do. I try to bid it based off of how long I think it would take the average animator to do it. And I use that as my guide point for every shot, regardless of whether I think it's a senior shot or a junior shot or someone. And I say, this many days, and then I send that to the producer, and then they come up with some magic numbers that may or may not match.
Of course. They shake the house and then come back to you and say how many days you have left. What defines a good animator?
Attitude. I think attitude is more important. I'd rather have a team of people who are with less, animation ability, but are keen to learn and enthusiastic about what they're doing, then because I do think that if you have someone who's super talented but they have a bad attitude, it brings down the team. So I'd rather not have that person and have more junior people and have people that build each other up. Because eventually, especially if they're passionate, they will get better. So they will be those superstar animators. So
they will,
for me,
of course,
attitude.
They will improve if they have the right attitude, as you said. At some point, it's gonna take maybe longer than those superstars, but they will get there.
Yeah. You can't base your whole project off of a single superstar.
Of course, because this particular person could fail you at some point because of his attitude. So we never know.
If you bring down the team, they're not going to perform well. And if you are super reliant on one person, if they're ever off or if they decide to leave or anything, then you're kind of a little bit screwed, because you've got that one point of failure. Whereas if you've got a whole team of people that are maybe not as high as that person, but pretty good and in that want to improve. If one of them is away, it's not as big of a hit. And you also have them helping each other out and helping to learn and stuff. And you see that on that a lot of the attitude stuff as well comes down from how you supervise and how you lead. You have to kind of make your team comfortable and make them feel like they are valued, and also help to guide them and see what's working and what isn't. And one of the things we do on the show I'm currently on is like a tips and tricks session every week, where a different member of the team, generally it's started by myself and the leads, will lead workflow, speeding up your workflow, or this is how to use this tool, or this is how to do that. And then we open it up to the floor to kind of we've got like a spreadsheet where people put in requests of things they want to learn about. So, my team asked me, I want to know more about facial anatomy and the muscles in the face so I can animate, facial performance better. So I did a class on that. And then a lot of them are like, oh, I've found this new technique that has actually sped up my workflow. So we give them a forum to showcase that. And I think that making people feel like they're more involved, more a part of something, and they're helping each other grow, also builds that kind of team feeling. And everybody kind of improves together. You don't have one person who's just hogging all of the knowledge.
Yeah, so, the king of the jungle. In that makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah.
And that only happens if you have an enthusiastic team and a team that's willing to learn.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, totally agree. What is the primary criteria, or the primary skills you're looking for to recruit? I mean, for recruitment to recruit an animator.
I will generally look at the reel to see, depending on the role you're hiring for. If you're hiring for someone more senior, you obviously want to see the complexity of the work and stuff, and you rely a lot on feedback from your references and stuff like that, and also gauge how well they communicated and just their kind of demeanor in the interview itself. And you kind of question them about how they did shots and what their challenges were, and see how they answered them, and how they to kind of make sure that they actually did those shots and know everything, but B, to also test the communication, because the communication is is so important. And then if it's like a more junior role, I'd rather hire someone who I thought maybe wasn't ready yet, but I saw potential in the work, because you can help them grow.
Yeah, of course.
It's nice when you see like the same person apply, where previously they were unsuccessful and they've applied again, and maybe they aren't at the level that you're hiring for, but you've seen growth in that time. You're like, well, maybe they can grow into that role. And as long as your schedule allows for it as well, if you can get enough of those people and actually help them grow, they become, sometimes they become one of the strongest on your team. And that's happened a few times on shows that I've been on, where people have started as juniors, and by the end of that one show, they've been doing, incredibly senior work. So, yeah, potential is the biggest thing for juniors. Yeah.
There is, for instance, Neil Blomkamp, the director of District 9, Elysium, etc., who is actually, I think he used to be an animator. He's coming from VFX. I was wondering if, I don't know, maybe in 5-10 years, or maybe next year, you would like to be still involved, in the movie industry, but in a different position, like a director. Would this something, would that attract you? Or?
Maybe. I think so. When I first started working in film, I always thought I'm going to end up being a director. I'm going to be Brad Bird. I'm going to be, something like that. But then the idea kind of disappeared from me a little bit, and now I'm kind of more and more wanting to have greater involvement in the overall look and feel and the storytelling element of, not just my shot or my sequence, or, have to necessarily tell somebody else's story. I'm getting more interested about telling my own story. But I don't know when that would be. The problem is I love animation, and the higher up you go, the less animation you do.
Actually, that's my next question. Yeah, because
I still assign myself shots.
Here you go.
I still animate.
You guessed my question. Yeah, because the more, as you said, the more higher you go, the less involved you are in shots. You more involved maybe in builds. Yes, you build your, for instance, in FX. As a lead, you do the build of some of your work or most of it. Sometimes it depends on the show, depend of your availability and the people around you as well. But yeah, if FX supervisor or animation supervisor, you are more around, giving feedback, doing the liaison between the client and your team and the subs and all the other departments. You focus more on other things. And this is a little story. I remember back in the days, 2013, I think. I won't name names, but there were one CG soup and one VFX soup. And we were at the basement, the theater in the basement of MPC. And it was a Saturday. We had to work on Saturday. And both of them were arguing how we can parent constrain in Maya. And both did not open Maya like for 10 years. And they were sitting around, no, this is how we do it. And I knew how to do it, but I couldn't say anything because I was just a junior, just starting. I'm not, who am I to say anything? So I just,
left them to it. Yeah.
So I said to myself, I mean, of course, at some point, maybe if I want to have another position or go higher up, I don't want to be like that, meaning being so much focus on, of course, I mean, that's part of the job. You can't, I mean, if you have 8 hours meetings a day, when you're gonna allow yourself to do a shot, it's just impossible,
You have to make time. I think there's certain aspects of it. So, there's a couple of reasons why I do give myself shots. One, I think it is a skill. If you don't use it, you lose it. I think it's important that when I give notes, I have a context of how hard it is for my team to actually achieve those notes, because I know the constraints of, the rig, the pipeline, everything. And if I disassociate from that, I don't ever want to take it out on my team. I want to know what they're going through, so then I understand how better to give notes. And also, like I said earlier, I just love animation, so I'm not doing it for the selfish reason for that. But the important thing is it can't come at the cost of your team or the cost of the project.
Of course.
So it's, for me, trying to find time to animate. It has to be in my time, my whether it's spare time, whether it's time outside of meetings or anything. But if anybody ever calls me for a meeting, or if anybody asks for feedback, or I will never put anything off that helps the project just for my own personal animation reasons.
Yeah. You prioritize the show, the needs, what artists need around you, and then of course it's like a cherry on the cake. If you have time, you can do it. Otherwise,
and I have been on some projects where I'm not animating because I want to. I'm animating because I have to, because you don't necessarily have enough senior people.
That's true as well.
You do that too, and you just have to get the work done, and you have to get something out. And it's, you don't have the time to guide someone through it who's more junior. You just have to say, like, I'm going to do this. It's going to take me half an hour, however long it takes, and just get it out, because otherwise I'm holding up the whole project.
Yeah, of course. Do you think you have time to learn new skills, new technologies, or do you think sometimes you're just a firefighter, just trying to block the fire and move on to another show or another movie?
It's difficult to say. I think it's impossible to know everything because you just don't have enough time. And when you are trying to learn something, it's at the sacrifice of something else, which is generally your personal life. And depending on your responsibilities in your personal life or whatever you have going on, you might not have that time to give up. So you have to be, if you do want to learn something new, or if you do want to try something else, or animate another shot or something, you need to be certain that what you're giving up for is like it's worth it. And sometimes, you know, you have to try to like balance the scales as well. Like me learning this new technique or this new tool set or something might mean that we can deliver the film faster, or I can deliver notes in a more efficient way, and my team understands it better. So it's better for me in the long run. But right now,
it's an investment.
It's a killer. Yeah, it's an investment. And other times you're like, this is a nice to have. You know, it'd be cool to know this, but is it actually going to help me do my job? Is it actually going to help my team? Is it going to help us deliver what the client wants? Maybe in a hypothetical, if this specific situation arose, then it'd be useful. But is that really worth everything I'm giving up to learn it or to know it?
Yeah, I get what you mean. How much, in your opinion, the industry evolved in the last 10 years? From your point of view, from animation?
Hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely. I think it's become a lot more accessible. I think when I started, I studied here in the UK. There was Bradford University had a course on animation, and there was no one else really. There was when I first went to university, I studied computer science because for me it was like that's the only route into computer animation. You need to do that, and I applied to courses where they had some kind of visualization module or something where you can kind of learn it. It was before Animation Mentor and iAnimate and stuff like that. And I went to university in Canterbury, did the computer science course there, but then I saw there was actually this multimedia course that they did that was it was a bit of a mix of different media forms. We learned a bit of filmmaking, a little bit of Maya, a little bit of sound editing and all this other kind of stuff. And the tutor that taught Maya was one of the original animators on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I was like, this is quite cool. And then he started a master's course in animation, and I jumped onto that, and that's what springboarded me in. But nowadays, like every university has some kind of animation or VFX course. There's a million online schools you can go and learn to. I mean, even if you're an established animator already, but you think, oh, I'm really good at creature stuff, but I don't know enough about character stuff, you can just do the course online. You don't have to sign up to a university to do it anymore. So it's really easy to get into. Visual effects itself as an art form has expanded to the point where it's in every single movie. Even if it's a period drama, there's visual effects in it. 100%.
So many
something
visual
People only really notice if the visual effects at the start of the show, like the big superhero movies, or it's bad visual effects where it stands out.
Yes.
But 99% of the time, people don't realize it's visual effects and it's there. But at least the
Crown,
public,
for instance, is it's not supposed to have, but it's full of visual effects.
Exactly. Like 15 years ago, you asked someone what visual effects was in the street, they wouldn't have known. Now I think 9 out of 10 people, maybe not that many, but maybe like 7 out of 10 will understand. They'll be like, oh yeah, that's special effects, or that's this, or whatever. And so just the fact that there's more visibility on it, and the fact that there's more schools means there's more people getting into it. And now since COVID, the projects have exploded. So now there's actually the work for them to do as well. So there's been a huge evolution in terms of how it's seen in the public, in terms of people getting into it, and also because of its prominence in film, I think it's become a lot more acceptable for parents to like encourage their kids to get into it, which wasn't always the case. I think if you come from I'm generalizing here, but based off of my own experiences and stuff, if you come from more of a third world kind of background, or a poorer family or something, my parents, actually they didn't push me, but like I come from a very big family. Everybody's a doctor or a lawyer, engineer, nurse, and there you get pushed more into the traditional fields because that is your route out of poverty, out of your situation. And now there's way more avenues, not just visual effects, but like music and drama and all of these things that are, acting and everything that wasn't a path before is an acceptable path now, and it is a way to improve your life whilst also doing something you love. So
the path, the career path is clearer than it used to be, like a couple of years ago, or not a couple of years ago, but 5 to 10 years ago. Yeah, it's the same for me. I mean, my parents are coming from similar background, African, moved to France, and yes, my father still doesn't understand what I'm doing anyway, so
yeah,
I tried, but
yeah, my mum doesn't either. I mean, she knows I work in films, and she knows I did an animation degree and a multimedia course and stuff, and she knows I use computers, so she thinks I can do everything with a computer, and tells every time that like family member's computer breaks down, she's like, "Oh, Waleed will come fix it. He'll do this, do that." And then there was one time where her friend's son, she was like, "Oh, can you speak to him? He's doing design course as well, similar to you, like but he doesn't know what path to take and stuff." I'm like, "I can, but I'm not a designer, I'm an animator." It's like, "Yeah, but it's using computers and stuff." And yeah, it's the same. I was like, "Okay, I guess I can go speak to him." I went and spoke to him, and so like, my mom said, you're going to show me your portfolio and you want some advice? He's like, "Yeah, okay." And then he got his portfolio out, and it's all clothing. He wanted to be a fashion designer.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's really like no concept at all. It's just like you use a computer, you're all the same.
Yeah. Me, like when I was, I was the Wi-Fi fixer in the neighborhood because I knew a little bit of computer, so everyone was like, my Wi-Fi is not working. Call your provider. Yeah, so I was not fixing computer, I was just fixing the router, so everyone can have Wi-Fi. Which is completely different, and it's more IT work. So, yeah. But
once you do it once, you're known as the guy that does it.
Yeah, you just have to do it once, and it's just by chance, I just fix it once for one, old lady in the neighborhood, and that's it.
Yeah,
you're known in the city now, not only in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
but you are the router fixer. You just your job. You were born to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. You get pigeonholed into it. Yeah. This has nothing to do with what I do.
I ask people for help actually to fix my Wi-Fi. Most people think that with motion capture, keyframe animation will get obsolete. Do you agree with that?
No, I definitely disagree. I think motion capture is incredible. It's an amazing tool for visualizing ideas very quickly, and depending on the creature you want to kind of get the performance of. Sometimes, especially with the advancements in the way that we're capturing it, there's very little that an animator actually has to do in the end, especially if it's like a human to human or something else, or even to an ape to a certain degree. You can kind of copy that, like retarget that pretty successfully. But with other creatures, it's quite hard. You can get the acting performance and the timing down, but there's just too much difference in our physiology and the way that we move. And then you also need to capture the mannerisms of that creature, which an actor can't always encompass. So there's always animation there. And then just by the nature of what we do fantastical things that humans can't physically do. You can't motion capture Superman flying. It's just not going to happen.
That's not possible.
Yeah, you can motion capture a lot of other stuff, but you can't physically make someone fly with real world physics.
Or unicorn.
Yeah, anything like that. It's incredibly useful, and it gives ideas quickly, so you can show stuff to a director very, very quickly and be like, "What about this?" Whereas with keyframe, it's a much slower process. So for me to get that previs out when I didn't use any motion capture, take me a lot longer to get, in this amount of time it'd take me to animate one piece, I could have motion captured like 50.
Yeah.
So you can really hone in on the ideas that way. I think it's super useful, but it will never replace it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you heard once Andy Serkis talking about having an award about motion capture. I don't know. I think it's a joke, but I don't know what's your opinion, because, I mean, as any other field, so many talented animators around the world, super talented animators around the world, never said anything about it, and all of a sudden, because, of course, I mean, I'm not denying his performance. His performance was great, but most of it was redone, I mean, afterwards, so...
Yeah. Well, I think another thing to why it will never replace it is sometimes the performance isn't great.
Yeah.
And the director asks you for a different performance.
Yeah.
But they don't inform the actor that it's not their performance. So they don't always know that it wasn't always them. And generally, especially with the ones that don't know the process, I'm sure he does. You know, he owns his own motion capture studio
of course,
and everything. So he's well aware of what goes into it. So I don't want to speak for him. But I think there's a lot of other people in the industry who don't actually know. And they're always told, yeah, that's 100% you, that's all you, that's everything. Because they're just surrounded by people that tell them that.
Yeah, of course.
And they never have interaction with the artist. They never have visibility. They never see them doing the work. So they don't actually know how much goes into it. They don't know the hundreds of hours it's taken for someone to curate a performance that, yeah, they originated, but it was finished by these other people. So it's a little bit frustrating. I remember when that came out, we were working on apes, and you know, it's belittling and it's very demeaning.
I did not like the way, I don't know, it might be me, but I did not like the way he said it, because exactly. I mean, you're denying all the work of people around it. I mean, around the movie, and the movie was amazing.
Yeah.
Not only Planet of the Apes, actually, even Lord of the Rings, or it's not something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like we are not speaking enough for ourselves. That's the way how I see it.
There's that, but I think we definitely need to shout louder.
Yeah.
But we've also never had a voice.
Yeah.
Partly because, you know, there aren't many members in the academy that are from visual effects backgrounds. There's not many people who want to listen, and also that it's weird because the whole point of our industry is supposed to be invisible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's gone too far, to the point where we've made the artists invisible, not just their work.
Yeah.
You know, seamless in the thing. It's not like visual effects not supposed to take you out of the enjoyment of the film.
No, of course.
It's not supposed to stand out.
It's
supposed to enhance it.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to notice it.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
So if it's done well, you should know it's there. But then, because of the movie magic, and because I think there's this emphasis to win awards by pushing the technology, what that actually does is also puts down the artists, because you're saying this is only good because of the technology, not because of the artists behind it.
Yeah.
And that's not just, you know, the actors. That is the studios. That is the visual effects houses as well that
of course
hire us.
Producers
are responsible for that.
Everyone, yeah.
They're all responsible for, you know, making our role and our contribution seem smaller than it actually is. It's a little bit frustrating. I think that we are getting more of a voice because of the changes we talked about earlier, where you know, there is more visibility on what visual effects is. There's more people getting into it.
More understanding. Yeah.
Numbers give, you know, a voice.
Yeah.
So I think things will change. But yeah, movie magic is all about like technology this, technology that, and not talking about the people behind it to really, who created those performances. You look at, you know, even within the Oscars, there's one visual effects category.
Yeah. And that's
how
totally
many different
wrong.
disciplines.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
You know, there's like 3 or 4 different sound awards.
Yeah,
I'm not saying they're not important.
No, of course. But it should be the same for visual effects. And animation. Actually, I don't agree that we have only one price for an animation movie. How many departments do you have in an animation feature? It's unbelievable. It's as many as any visual effects movie.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't understand why we don't have an animation category, and modeling category. I don't understand that. Why we're doing it for other things and not for visual effects. Knowing like, I don't know, at least 8 movies out of 10 have visual effects in it. So, I mean, in a way, there is no visual effects, no movies nowadays. It's not possible. Even small indie movies that that have like
some level of compositing, at least, if not anything else.
At least a 2D compositing, some roto, you will need something. You need to raise a cable. You need visual effects. You like it or not. So sometimes I feel like producers not producers like in our. I speak film producers do not accept the fact that. I don't know why or what's the reason. Well, I have few theories again, but I don't know. Yeah, let's not go there.
I think the producers themselves accept because they know how much it's costing them. They don't want to look at the budget.
We are the most expensive.
The most expensive part of the film for sure. But it's part of it as well is like trying to sell and the actor as well. Because, there's a...
Don't you think it's an ego thing? Don't you think it's an ego problem? The fact that, of course, we have to keep the actor's ego at bay, or,
No, I don't think it is. Because I can see where they're coming from. When they are told by everybody around them that is their performance, they did everything, that's all of that stuff. And then it's also been a while since they actually shot everything, and then they see on the big screen, they do think it's them. They do think it's, all that time at the gym, that's how I looked. Not realizing people have touched them up and, got rid of things and reshaped their bodies. And because, retouching photos is a well-known thing
of course
in advertising and stuff, but people don't realize it's exactly the same in film. You change people's body shapes, you change everything
for multiple frames. That's the difference.
It's moving, but because people it's just not known about, including the actors. They're like, I looked really good then. It's well, did you?
Exactly.
I can show you the real plate. So I would also have an ego, and I also think it was me if everybody around me told me it was me. No one tells them.
So it's a little lie just to ease the things out, easy things out. Like, okay, just I want to be agreeable, So it's you, and I don't want to have a problem with anyone.
But then it helps again to win more awards if they don't know. If they're like, I worked really hard, I trained really hard for this role, I did this, did that. Not saying that they didn't.
But
it also helps them to actually, gain more recognition because it's like, wow, look at their transformation specifically for this role, and wow, look at all of this, and
I totally get it, but I still think it's not fair for us in general, especially for you, for instance, as an animator, busting your ass, to fix problems and do the actual performance sometimes, instead of the actor, or fixing the actor's performance, and then sometimes you don't have your name credited, and that's another problem. But that's something that I can understand as well. Is like it's a blackboard with names in white, and I still don't get how expensive this should be. How expensive. I understand back in the days it was a film and you have to print it on film. Yeah, okay, I get it.
But now it's digital.
I don't understand. What's the point? If okay, no problem. Let the credit run for 10 minutes. What's the problem with you? It's okay. It's fine.
I think I don't know. I'm speculating. I think runtime is quite an important thing for the studios. So they will cut parts of their film out to make it shorter, just because it means, like, if my film is 95 minutes instead of 100, just cutting 5 minutes out or whatever it is you can fit in more screenings a day or something. So
but
there's also that.
Is I think the credit to have this own timing, no?
Was the runtime of the whole film from start to finish?
I think when they say a minute and 20, in an hour and 20 minutes,
it includes the
credits. In my mind, it always doesn't include the credits. Yeah, okay.
So I don't know. Maybe that's an aspect to it. I've heard that there's numbers, like there's a cost per line. I don't know how true that is. I don't know how any of that is really allocated.
But
I know it's it's a bit strange there. I don't really know. Sometimes, I've worked on shows and not been credited. Sometimes I've done very minimal on shows and been credited, and people that actually contributed way more than me didn't. Yeah. So I don't really understand.
It happened to me as well.
Or how. Yeah. I do know. I remember when I was at Sega, I worked on actually the first Iron Man game.
Oh, nice!
And, but they credited me incorrectly. They misspelt my name. And I asked them to, because we obviously had the testing the game, when it was still very broken, and we had the first pass of the credits like 6-7 months before the game came out. I was like, can you not change it? It's just a text file, and all you had to do was copy and paste the name I sent you, and you managed to not do that correctly. And they're like, no. I'm like, you literally have 7 months to change a text file. And it wasn't. No, it's just simple things like that mean a lot to an artist, especially when you're starting out.
Of course.
Like this is your one thing to be proud of. You're taking your parents to see it, and like you get to see your name on the lights, and then you're like, my name's not there.
I mean,
they spelled my name wrong.
I totally agree with that, because I know people who are in deep debt, to study, to go to pay university or college, to do this industry. They're plus 100,000 pounds on debt, and then they're not having, as a junior salary, it's not huge. Living in London, the cost of living is not cheap. And then you kill yourself, you sleep in the office for months and months, and then at the end, you're not credited. Even if you have the energy to do it again, it's still bitter. You're still bitter, It's a bitter sweet feeling, because it's bitter because you feel like you were not credited, so you can prove that you work on it on the show, and it's sweet as well, because you have a foot in the industry, so it's still, you're still winning, but you have to wait a little longer to be acknowledged.
Yeah. So. It's a big part of it is just respect. Like, even if you still made a contribution to that film. That film would have not been made without you. You did something, and it ended up in it. It's on screen. You should be acknowledged for that.
Yeah, it's like Ang Lee, the director of Life of Pi, who thanking everyone, his dog, everyone, his taxi driver, and not thanking the people who did his movie. So when you have directors like that, in my opinion, it influenced the entire industry, because they have a mic and
they have a platform. They are demeaning us on purpose. Where I think before our prior comments about certain actors and stuff, and I don't think there's intention.
No. Of course.
Whereas with him, I think that was...
No. I think he did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Plus, cutting off the supervisors of Rhythm Hughes, winning an Oscar and getting bankrupt. Which industries have this? No one. No. You speak about any industry. If you are winning an award, that means you are successful. You're a successful business. It's not the case. You are winning awards, but you're not successful. You're not a successful business, which doesn't make any sense. And still, it was not a wake-up call. I mean, 10 years later, we're still speaking about the same problem, the same...
Well, it happened like a couple of years ago with Cats, and them coming out, and,
Everyone spit on the artists for Cats.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. No, that was... the director's vision was to make it look like that. People worked their asses off, and they gave him what he wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Instead of questioning the vision and the way I've worked with directors who doesn't have a clue what they want. I want this, that. Okay, could you be more precise? I don't know. What do you mean I don't know? Why are you doing a movie then? I mean, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, give it to someone else. Don't. Sometimes people think they can hide their mistakes behind VFX, and unfortunately, that's what's happening, especially with a lot of TV shows at the moment. Is for the lack of storytelling or any other reason, they just putting, sorry for the shit on top of shit, and then it looks great. No, it doesn't look great. It looks horrible. And at the same time, you look horrible because of your feedback, you know?
Yeah. Just throwing us under the bus.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. That's the word.
It's not particularly nice.
No. What's the best way to become an animator for a high-end company?
I think the best way is to do some kind of animation course. It doesn't matter which one. Actually, you don't even need to, because there's a lot of free tutorials as well. It's just the dedication. You need to dedicate time to learn, understand the principles. I think there's a few things that are important to animation. A lot of people focus on the acting, and they don't pay attention to the timing, or they'll pay attention to the timing, but they don't pay attention to the physics, because if you don't understand momentum and forces, you're not going to be able to animate, even like a bouncing ball. It's just simple, but there's a reason why people start with that. It's just basic understanding of gravity and physics and, the mass of that thing and its properties. So kind of having a basic understanding of physics, storytelling, and acting is useful. And then it's just dedication. And what you should do when you apply. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that their show reel has to show everything, and they end up with really long show reels where there's lots of variety, but everything's mediocre. Focus on I'd rather see like a reel that's 20-30 seconds long, but every shot is great, than like 3 minutes and a couple are good and a couple are bad, because you're probably going to be judged on the worst thing on your reel. Of course, yeah. If you're thinking this is good enough to present to people, then they'll also, interviews might also be questioning, your judgment. It's like, do you think this is good, and so on. So don't focus on trying to do everything. Just do a couple of things really well and apply to a studio that does that. And if especially like the type of project you want to work on or where you want to work, the types of projects that, ILM does, the types of projects that MPC does, Frame Store and stuff. You can do, every studio kind of specializes in something. So you can cater, the shots you're making for them. But generally there's a few shots that are all like pretty, what's the word? Standard? Universal. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Standard, universal, yeah. So like if you can do some kind of quadruped creature and make it look believable as an acting piece, not necessarily even a walk or run circles. I think everyone has that. But if you can do just something that shows you understand its anatomy and the way it moves and weight transfer, that's good. And then just an acting piece as well, and that's good. And then that can kind of go to, you can pretty much apply everywhere there. If you've got a nice acting piece, regardless of whether you're applying to full CG or to VFX, most companies will kind of give you a chance, because that at least shows storytelling, timing, and acting and performance. And then you can kind of teach the rest. You can learn the rest in-house. Yeah. So just don't do a lot. Focus on a small amount and make it really good.
Elwaleed, I wanted to thank you for being with me today. It was an immense pleasure. I enjoyed it a lot, and I learned so much from your experience. Thank you very much again for being with me and with us, actually. Thanks to Yusuf for helping me today.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun talking about a lot of different things. But it's been a long time coming. So thanks again for inviting me on your show, and hopefully somebody out there enjoys it.
I enjoyed it. We don't care. That's the most important thing.
Okay.
Thank you very much again. Thank you.
No worries.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. Thank you.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.